Bonsoir, Steve. Good morning, George. G'day. Let me tweet my thing. I look tired, don't I? I look, I look really tired. This week. It's not just this week. It's the whole lead up. Doing the steel log stuff. I went to the doctor for one of those normal checkups you're meant to do all the time the other day. He takes my blood pressure and he's like, this is a little bit high. And it's like, it's really unusual. It has been a very busy, what is it? I'm going to say this, month. Let's say month. Might be the coffee as well. It was normal, a normal range. What was it? 120 over 80. I forgot what that mean, but when I put it in my Withings app, because there's an app for everything, and the reason I got the Withings app is I've got one of those IoT blood pressure things that from Withings records every time. I've got the same from them with the thermometer, which is actually pretty cool. So if someone's feeling sick, every time you take the temperature, you can select the name and then it saves it in the app. So you can go, okay, here's where you've been the last few days. I've got the scales. I've been using their scales, I think, for 12 years. So I have 12 years worth of weigh-ins, which is pretty cool. So anyway, Withings app says it's fine, but I should take it first thing in the morning before having coffee, apparently. It's been a big week. Let me start with, well, I'll start from where I finished last week, because I was here. I was pretty much bang on 7 days ago, I reckon, almost to the minute, where I finished the last one here. Went to Sydney. So we had Friday in Sydney, spending time with some partners in the industry. Had Monday, spending time with some law enforcement agencies to do some work with. Got a very cool challenge coin. This is a challenge coin from the RCMP, Royal. Where are they? Canadian. It's early. Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And I'm looking a lot at challenge coins lately because we're getting very close to doing a Have I Been Pwned one to share with law enforcement partners. I'll talk more about that logo in a second, actually, and the branding. But this is cool, and it's a little bit hard to see probably from the camera there, but it's got like a bison, I assume, with lots of circuitry around it. So it's like a circuitry bison, which is kind of cool. And then on the other side, we have got, as best I can tell in this light here, a map of Canada and the shield of the RCMP, which is cool. So we collect these challenge coins. We've got a little box of them over there, a little display cabinet. The Have I Been Pwned one we're working on, I actually kind of like the idea of doing like having a little bit of Australia on it. So maybe having like a boxing kangaroo made out of the circuitry on one side, and then the Have I Been Pwned brand and all the other bits on the front. Now that brand we are ticking along really well with. We have now finalized and locked in the logo. I did my first 3D print of the logo yesterday, which I was pretty happy with. I have now ordered 10 spools of filament to get my single printer print farm crunching away at that before I go away in a few weeks. What else have we done? I'm not sure about a bit of gradient. I showed Scott Helm for the first time last night, and he's like, there's something there needs to change a little bit. But the shape and the layout and everything, I'm just really, really happy about. I've ordered thousands of stickers based on that layout as well, which is pretty cool. So that'll be coming shortly. The website, we're getting rebuilt at the moment. In fact, what we're doing is we've got a guy in Iceland, not Stefan, another guy in Iceland. There are many of them doing the front end. So I think I spoke recently about doing it all. We're going, okay, well, look, what sort of framework should we use? Should we be using, I don't know, Tailwind, HTMLX? They are the two popular suggestions. No, we're doing it in Bootstrap 5. And we've got someone who's doing that front end at the moment that I'm very, very happy with, someone who's working really fast as well. I think we're going to open source all of this, I want to say within 1 to 2 weeks. I think we will have a bit of a soft launch of the brand. We will open up the repository that's got all of effectively the templates that our man in Iceland is building at the moment. And then we'll let the masses come in. And you can tell us what we've done wrong, what we've done better, before we start to take all that and build it into the entire website itself. I know there are things that we want to do, such as accessibility, which I haven't even looked at yet in the template we have. I'll start to talk in a moment about the steel log stuff. There's definitely stuff we want to explain better, that we want to make clearer and easier, especially for the normies to get their heads around. But as I'll talk about in a moment, there's a lot of concepts here where even the more technical amongst us, we've just got to get nomenclature and characterizations of certain types of data right. So that's coming. I'm very excited about that. I'm very, very excited about the opportunity to rebuild what is almost a 12-year-old website now and make it make sense. I think that's a fair way of putting it. Make it make sense. All right, let's talk about Stealer logs. Now, I had mentioned last week, in fact, I think pretty much the whole topic of discussion last week was around processing these Stealer logs. I mean, this has just been painful for all sorts of reasons, and I'm wondering if it was a good idea at the moment. It was a good idea. It was a good idea because it's useful, and a bunch of people have figured out why they might have suddenly had their accounts taken over, or why they were getting funny spam. Maybe we just start with like the raw numbers of it. So 1.5 terabytes worth of data from this alien text-based Stealer log. And I always like to give a little bit more character in these videos to what I do in the blog post. I didn't say it explicitly in the blog post, but you might have noticed I did not name the URL, not give the URL. I don't want to point people to the data any more than necessary. Now, it's a little bit like any time there's a data breach and it's published on a popular hacking website. People who want to figure it out will figure it out, but people who want to figure it out will figure it out anyway. I'm just trying to chop out the ability for the normies to go through and suddenly pull down 1.5 terabytes worth of other people's data. It looks like the channel that was publishing this went offline after, or I think it might have just been locked after I put this out. I also think, based on what I've heard from people, it may have come back again as well. To be honest, whether it did go offline, whether it has come back again or not, is kind of irrelevant because this stuff is floating around all over the place anyway. And of course, as soon as I publish this, people pop up out of the woodwork and they're like, hey, have you seen this other one where there's like even more data there? And I'm just going, oh, God, I miss normal data breaches. Put a normal data breach in yesterday, Orange Romania. So if you are an Orange customer in Romania, you may have got a notification from me yesterday. It's actually nice just to deal with a discrete data breach, verifiable from the source. It's already in the press. Multiple people sent me the data. It's just like, yep, load it, job done, go away. No more problems from that, which is great. Now I'm just getting an email back about a story that I'm going to talk about when we get to spyware. Let's see what my friend here has said. Okay. All right, we'll talk about that later. Right, so Stealer logs. Now, the problem with Stealer logs has always been that they can be hard to action. Like in the past, when I've loaded them to have been paying before 2025, so not including last month when I started putting the domain that had appeared against websites and Stealer logs. Before that, it's hard to action. So people go, oh, I'm in a Stealer log. What do I do now? It's like, well, lock your things down, don't reuse your passwords, maybe make sure your machine's okay. But part of the problem is, and this is one of the things that's come through after publishing this, is that when you get Stealer logs, in this case 1.5 terabytes, 23 billion rows, incidentally, this was a good case of the AI doing a good job. Oh, I've got to tell you an AI story too. How do you count the number of lines in 744 files that have 1.5 terabytes? At the time, I didn't know the final number, but 23 billion lines. How do you count that fast? Pumped into ChatGPT, they said, go to Git Bash. Go to Git Bash, run this command, and for each file in the directory, it will list the number of lines. And it took a lot of hours, but yeah, it was like a 4-character command. Someone probably knows what it is, but that was the easiest possible way. So 23 billion rows in there. Now, this data consists of your classic Stealer log structure, website with URL, email address, password, delimited. And it also consists of a bunch of other junk. And well, it's not really junk, but what I mean by junk is you might have Android schemes, Android : // massive URLs that's obviously come out of infected Android devices. You've also got a bunch of classic credential stuffing information, email address, password pairs, and it's all mixed in together. And then you've got to try and parse through what we now know as 23 billion lines, which I've got a little techie section down here, and I did talk about it last week, so I won't delve into it. But ultimately done all that with the .NET Console app, dumped all the good ones here, the good lines here, the bad lines there, so ultimately I could go and see what was excluded, what was kept. Yeah, and we come up with this huge corpus of data, 284 million unique email addresses. That number is significant, and about 31% of those had not already been pwned. So that was a lot. Then going through and extracting out those email address website pairs, getting them up into Have. It sounds easy, but it's taken a month. Now, it's taken a month, but there are aspects of this which we'll refine, or we've certainly things we've learned from that we'll do more efficiently later on. In the techie section, I explain that one of the problems we've had is that if we dump a huge amount of data into SQL Server in the cloud, you spin SQL Server up to as many cores as you can have, which is 80 cores, which is about 800 Aussie dollars a day, which is not fun to burn through that. I got my Azure bill for the last month yesterday and nearly had a heart attack. So that wasn't good. But then you run a query, and if you start running a query, you have no idea how long it's going to run for. And there was a couple of times there where that query on the 80 cores was running, I think on one of those it was running for a day and a half, and I just got to the point where I said, I've now burned $1,200. Mind you, it's $800 a day. There's a baseline which it would normally run at a couple of $100 a day. So let's say I burned an extra $1,200 over and above. $900 for a day and a half. And eventually you kill the query and go, okay, well, that's not going to work. Let's try this another way. And the overarching summary is that what we've found is that doing as much processing locally here on this machine using .NET to do things like get distinct pairs of email address and domain, that was the most efficient thing, because you sort of start with this massive corpus, the 23 billion, and you're chopping it down into this funnel where eventually what actually gets loaded into the tables is the distinct email addresses, 284 million, which is a long way down from 23 billion, and then the distinct email address and website pairs. And then separately to that, of course, the passwords as well. We did 450 million requests on pwned passwords yesterday. I'm not quite sure. Let's just say it was yesterday, in a day. I'm not sure if that was our yesterday or UTC's yesterday. So we eventually filter all this down. We get all this data loaded, go live with the blog post and the data. And the blog post explained, the blog post was nearly 4,000 words. My fault. I think part of the problem is I don't want to feel like I leave a stone unturned. So I'm just going to put all the information there. I'm going to explain everything I know. And then nobody will have any questions because everything will be there. But of course, if you put enough stuff in there, then people inevitably don't read the important bits. And the important bits included, if you want to check your own email address and see which domains your email address appears against in the Stealer logs, go and use the notification service. It will send you an email. You click on the link, you go back to the website, you've verified control, it now shows you. Freely available in the UI. And I had all of these people thinking that they needed to pay money. Individuals, normies, as we call them. And like that's on me. I missed something really, really important. And in fact, there were some individuals that did pay money to do that and then log tickets going, I can't understand what's happening. So of course we refund them straight away. That's an easy one. But I feel really bad that there was that misinterpretation. The text was definitely in there. And if you look at the comments, I started out so this was Wednesday morning my time, 48 hours ago, pretty much. I started out just like quoting myself over and over and over and over again. And there's a bit here, it says, the web UI that uses the notification service to show steel log results by email is absolutely still free and will remain that way. But that was in 4,000 other words worth of text. So a bunch of people missed that. And of course, because it's the internet, in some other channels, someone sent me a link to a place with a bunch of comments, and I started reading it and going, oh, this is why you don't read the comments. There are a bunch of people that were pissed, thinking that this was just a big cash grab when it's free, but it wasn't clear. The bit that was no longer free was the bit about if you want to check vast volumes of data because you're an enterprise and you want to check everyone in your domain, or if you want to see everyone who has had their creds stolen against your domain, then that required the Pwn 5. I spoke about that last week. I put that idea out there. No one disagreed with it. I think a couple of people are like, yeah, it sounds reasonable. And that bit's been received fine. I think that bit's been reasonable. So long as you make the right stuff for the right people freely available, and the right stuff for the right people has a reasonable price against it, you're making most people happy. And I'm fine with that. Got our outbound SendGrid mail IP on the naughty list, which was a bit of a shame. Ended up on Spam Cop's naughty list for about a day, which affected our email delivery. And the sucky thing there is that we've got effectively email login to the dashboard, passwordless email login. So if you want to go to your domain search dashboard and actually search to see the email addresses that are in there, and you go and you put your email address in and go send, and the mail doesn't come to you, you can't access the dashboard, which we knew was an issue. I did actually get some good support from someone at Spam Cop, and for reasons I do not understand, it seems like some of their spam trap email addresses, so Spam Cop has a bunch of email addresses, which of course they don't publish, where if they start getting spam, or rather if they start getting mail, they can conclude that it is spam because it never should be getting legitimate mail. It looks like there might have been a couple of those that were somehow in Have I Been Pwned as notification users. People should get an email when they're in a data breach, and they were getting mail based on spammier sorts of data breaches. So this one and a few others, not discrete data, not like Orange Romania, for example. So we're working on trying to resolve that, but that's a bit sucky. So of course we've got a bunch of tickets about that, which was annoying. We had a bit of a blind spot that I didn't realize when I was writing all this up, where when we launched these steel log searches last month, and I was like, hey, this is experimental. We've got all these services over here. We're just experimenting with this other thing here. But you need one of those services to query it. And then people went and took like a Pwn 3 subscription to query it. And then we've restricted all that to Pwn 5 this month. And they're like, whoa, hang on. I paid for a thing and I got it. And now, if that is you, log us a ticket and we're just freely upgrading people to Pwn 5. That was, again, my fault, blind spot. What else did I screw up? One of the things that is very, very confusing, and I spent a lot of time writing it carefully and talking to Stefan about it, and let's agree that we do it this way, is when you consider a steel log that has a website URL, https://netflix.com/login, and then an email address, we all know that what it looks like, and then a password, you've actually got two domains in there. So you've got the domain of the website and the domain of the email address. And you get enough Stealer logs, you got a lot of entries with the website domain, and you've got a lot of entries with the email address domain. You can now, based on these new APIs, look up on either. Explaining that to people, even techie people, InfoSec people, I've not done a good enough job of making that clear. And I was thinking of one ticket thread in particular, just kept going backwards and forwards, and the guy didn't understand. And I don't think he's silly for not understanding, but I just don't think we've explained it clearly enough. I feel like a lot of this as well gets tied up in the UX work that we're doing with Have I Been Pwned. I think that when we rebuild those interfaces and we have a clean slate and we can put examples on the page, for example. I think we'll be able to do a much better job of that. So that's a lesson learned on that one. What else do we learn out of that? It's just been a blur. Like, we've just had so many tickets. Even the blog post, I had to lock comments on the blog post, which I haven't done for a long time, because I was just getting so much. I've got 137 comments on there now, including my own responses. But there was just a fire hose of information coming through there, fire hose of tickets. I've got my big wall of graphs on the screen with the tickets on the bottom, and they just got exploding. So we had to try and slow it down. I think we're on top of everything now. Everything's getting back to to normal pace. So as at the moment, I'm archiving all of that data. That'll go offline into cold storage, and we'll move on to the next thing. Oh, there's one more thing. So one theme that came up is there were a bunch of people who said, my email address was in the data. I got the notification. I went to the website using the free UI-based one, and I've got, for example, the Gmail address, and the domain listed against my email address was gmail.com. Does that mean I have and there's only the one. Does that mean I have an info stealer on my machine and it now has my password? And there was a statistically significant number of people that said this, which seems to point to issues related to data integrity, either in the source data or my processing of the source data. Now, I think there's a few different ways of looking at this. So number one is, I think logically, if someone is infected by an info stealer, the likelihood of only having one entry, one domain against your email address, and it being the domain of your email address, seems to point that that's probably not an info stealer infection. And I'm seriously considering, I've got to look at the data from last month that we loaded as well. I'm seriously considering just going through, and anywhere where there's just one entry and it's the domain of the email address, just literally removing it. And when I say removing it from the stealer log table. There's no doubt whatsoever that that email address is in that corpus of data. You don't accidentally parse legitimate email addresses out of text that has nothing to do with it. So the email addresses are there. The question is whether they're actually legitimate stealer logs. So I'm not going to change anything with it right now because, frankly, I don't need to explain any more stuff by more blog posts and things. But my temptation is that as we get to the next round of stealer log stuff, and the next round might even be just going back through the previous stealer logs I've loaded and actually putting in the email address and domain pairs, I'm just very tempted, very, very tempted to exclude those single entries, because I think that whilst those email addresses exist, it's created a lot of confusion. So that's part of it. The other part of it is, as I said to people, it's like, look, if it's, let's say it's your Gmail address and you're worried about your Gmail account, go and change your Gmail password. It's free, it's not hard. While you're in there, go and turn on Google Advanced Protection. Go and chuck in a couple of U2F keys, like do the things to lock down your Google account, because it is the keys to your kingdom. After you've done all that, check the old password against phone passwords. So then you're not sending something even to us with anonymity where we can't actually see it. You're not sending anything that presents any risk. And if you don't come up with a hit, dismiss it, move on. This has often been the advice when I've loaded not just stealer logs, but anything from like malware to credential stuffing lists. All I can do in cases like this is report what we find. Now, if you feel there's no action required after that, then awesome. But there were a few cases of people being pissed at me reporting what I've found. And it happens every time with data like this. So I've got a thick skin, I'm used to it. But it is annoying when people are like, hey, please let me know when you find my data somewhere on the internet. And I'm like, hey, I found your data somewhere on the internet. And they're like, I'm angry because I don't know what that means. Well, okay, I guess you could unsubscribe. I could refund the $0 that you pay for these persons. It's always individuals too. It's never companies that actually pay for a subscription that are pissed. They're always pretty reasonable, rare exceptions aside. G'day, Wayne. Thanks for joining. All right, that's that. What else was on here? Let's go to something else. I was going to say less controversial. Maybe it's more controversial. Apple Advanced Data Protection and the Brits. Who's here from England? Or more specifically, the UK. So I'm sure the folks that are here from that part of the world or are listening to it later on are aware of where this is going. Robin puts up his hand. So Scott Helm was tweeting this the other day. Advanced data protection. Apple can no longer offer advanced data protection, ADP, in the United Kingdom to new users. Now, I feel this is equal parts not an issue and a major issue, and I'll explain both thinking. Wayne's also in that boat. Apple came along with advanced data protection, I think it was 2 and a little bit years ago. And if I'm honest, it was only probably about 1 year ago that I turned it on myself, and I'll explain why. If we read the description in iOS, and for folks that are Android users, I believe you have equivalents in Android. Advanced data protection. iCloud encrypts your data to keep it secure. Advanced data protection uses end-to-end encryption to ensure that the iCloud data types listed here can only be decrypted on your trusted devices, protecting your information even in the case of a data breach in the cloud. Because Apple will not have the keys required to cover your data, now this is the important bit, using advanced data protection requires setting up an alternative recovery method in case you ever lose access to your account. So in other words, it's E2E, it's encrypt your things on here before they go up into the cloud and get backed up, such that even if Apple is compelled to go and pull the data off their servers, they can't do anything with it because you hold the keys locally. Now, in that space, there is device backups, message backups. Now, keeping in mind, iMessage itself is E2E already. So even before ADP, Advanced Data Protection, you got the benefit of E2E when you used iMessage. But it's the backups of your device that have the messages that are subject to ADP. iCloud Drive, Notes, Photos. The reason I held off is because the whole point of E2E is that you're the only one that can unlock this stuff later on. All of my photos of any significance whatsoever, from when the kids were first born to Charlotte's and my wedding to all of this really important personal stuff, is there in photos. If I lose the ability to recover my data, I lose all my photos. Reminders, don't care as much about. Safari bookmarks, definitely don't care about. Siri shortcuts, voice memos, and wallet passes. It was really only the photos that I was... Ooh, that was literally my iPhone. Oh, you know why? I said the lady's name. I can't say that in front of the phone or it starts listening. Steve Yates says, I'm a Brit expat in France. Does that count? I believe, Steve, I don't know if you got an iPhone or not, but you can go and have a look. Just look for advanced data protection in your settings. I believe that if your location is set to France, you'll be okay. I'm quite sure it's based on where your location is set to. So anyway, I turned this on. It's on Charlotte's device too. Did I turn it on the kids? They don't have as much important stuff yet. Probably should do it anyway. Good practice. There are good recovery mechanisms as well, so long as you use them and document them and keep them available. But Scott's screen cap here, he's now got a warning, because Scott is a Brit, up the top. It says, Apple can no longer offer advanced data protection, ADP, in the United Kingdom to new users. And this boils down to the UK government compelling Apple to have means to recover users' data from the cloud. Scott's there. There he is. Now, I believe from your tweet, Scott, you said that Nick, your wife, has not turned this on and she now no longer has the ability to turn it on. Scott has turned it on and now he has a big turn off advanced data protection, which I have too, but I get the impression Scott's going to be forced into pushing that button sometime in the near future. Now, this is where I think it's like equal parts a little bit hyperbolic and worrying. The bit that I think is a little bit hyperbolic is that in Scott's household, I suspect, Scott, that 1 in 3 people have it enabled. Your son probably doesn't. Your wife definitely doesn't. Just established that. I would suspect that in the UK, the number of people that have gone and turned on this opt-in feature, and incidentally, I suspect that Apple hasn't pushed it too heavily, because if you screw this up, you lose everything forever by design. I think the number of people impacted by this in the UK will actually be a small number. And I don't know if anyone's actually seen what that number is, but if I was to hazard a guess, I'm going to say it's a single-digit percentage. That's a guess. Someone might come and tell me that I'm completely wrong. But even in Scott's highly tech household, it's 33%. So I think it's going to be a single-digit percentage. So the impact, excuse me, of this in particular, I don't think is going to be very significant. However, the premise of the government compelling a tech company to remove cryptographic protections is the thing that's much more worrying. The premise of, if Scott's forced into turning this off and I'm not, me having the ability to have better protections in just the same way Scott had better protections under GDPR than I did previously. I don't know what you got now. You sought your freedom and are no longer part of the EU. But that's what's worrying, removing the cryptographic protection. Now, I think we got a lot of hyperbolic press out of this as well, because there are a bunch of agencies that produce stories to the effect of Apple is now building in a backdoor. And it's not that, because first of all, as we just established, more than 90% of people, it doesn't change anything. Secondly, the idea of a backdoor was a deliberate compromise of security that is built into the platform by design to enable access via the likes of law enforcement. It's not that. They're turning off something that a small number of people had turned on for extra protection. And I appreciate that might be a nuance, and the end result is the same, in that if Apple is compelled to hand over data, they can. But I don't think the headlines of Apple building in a backdoor were fair. I also saw headlines to the effect of like Apple buckling or Apple giving in. They've got to follow the law of the country. Yeah, ask Durov how that went down in France. Like he ended up in jail. This is the Telegram founder. You are still subject to the law of the land. And I'm sympathetic to Apple. And I think the way they've done this is actually good, because it's created a massive amount of public backlash. And I wouldn't be surprised if it changes before they get to the point of telling the likes of Scott to turn it off. But they are still subject to the law in the UK if they want to operate in the UK. So I think they've done a reasonable job of the way they've handled this, but we'll see where it goes over time. Okay, next. What else was on the ticket for today? And I've got a pile of IoT bits sitting on my desk. I'm going to show you in just a moment. IoT and non-IoT bits. Spyware breaches. 2 spyware breaches I loaded from the airport on Friday last week. So just after recording last week's video. Now let's talk about these, because why do people install this stuff? And there's another one coming too. So there is a company. I'm going to just check Zach's story here so I get my facts right, because a lot's happened in the last week, evidently. Here we go. Coco Spy is one of them. Coco Spy and Spy IC. Stalkerware apps, Coco Spy and Spy IC, are exposing phone data of millions of people. Now, Zach Whitaker has written this up in TechCrunch. Security vulnerability in a pair of phone monitoring apps is exposing the personal data of millions of people who have the apps unwittingly installed on their devices, according to a security researcher who found the flaw. Now, this person has obviously been in contact with Zach. They've sent me the data as well. Those 2 are in Have I Been Pwned? There is another one that is coming today, all related to the same organization. Now, to put a little bit more shape around, a little bit more color, the analysis show that while using the app, the server would occasionally respond with status or error message in Chinese, suggesting the apps are developed by someone with a nexus to China. It's very hard to track down who's actually behind all this. Zach couldn't get a response from the organization. So this is a company where, if we look at the numbers that I put on Have I Been Pwned, Coco Spy, 1.8 million email addresses. Spy IC, 876,000 email addresses. The one later today is 500,000 something email addresses. And these are the email addresses only of the people who have signed up to the service. It's not the email addresses of their targets, which is kind of wild because there could be some crossover between these two if you're running multiple spyware apps, I guess. But if we add them all up together, you're at over 3 million people using these spy apps that have just left their data exposed. At the time of writing the original story, the vulnerability was still present. So Zach was a little bit vague in the way he explained the vulnerability for obvious reasons. But millions of people with their data exposed, the vulnerability, I only really got email addresses, but the vulnerability has exposed photos, call logs, messages. And I have seen the sorts of stuff that spyware exposes in those categories, things like photos from other spyware data breaches. And it is exactly what you would expect on the phones of hundreds of thousands or millions of unsuspecting victims who take all sorts of personal things. So this is kind of wild. And Zach's done a lot of writing about various spyware, or I think the term that he may have used here is stalkerware, because that's stalkerware, very first word of the title. There are so many cases where these apps are installed on victims' devices, often under circumstances such as domestic disputes, domestic violence, possibly to monitor children. I'm sure some people use it to monitor their kids. Don't do that. That's absolutely freaking stupid, because your children's photos are going to end up exposed on the cloud somewhere. It's just wild how many people install this stuff and how many incidents of data breaches that we have after this. I do kind of wonder about the non-consensual nature of this and the volumes of data, and if there's any ramifications after an incident like this. Now, this is also incidentally why I flag every single spyware breach as sensitive, because there is an implication that if someone is in a spyware breach, they are either the aggressor or the victim. Like, either they're the person who's trying to stalk their partner, or they are the victim who is being stalked by their partner. Now, of course, there are use cases where it is just monitoring kids, or it's monitoring employees, or things that are legal and consensual. There is even this whole space, which seems totally weird to me, where partners, husband and wife, for example, will install this on each other's device consensually. And I've seen this in things like, which one was it MSpy that had all of their Zendesk tickets exposed? I've literally seen this in the discussions. And they do this to monitor each other because of trust. The mind boggles. You don't really worry about advanced data protection if all your data is being sent to a Chinese spyware company anyway. So, another one of those to go up to date. There's another one that I've been sitting on for many, many, many months. It was sent to me by someone who hasn't seemed to have followed it up yet, but I need to pick that one up again. I might try and push that one to Zach as well, but I'd like to see that get some traction. It's just yeah, what a weird world we're living in. Okay, last thing, let's talk about some IoT stuff. Change of pace. I've been talking about IoT switches and the fact that I'm really unhappy with the dumb switches that we've had in our house, which are these ones here. I have this one in my hand because it's been replaced, and I'm going to talk about what it's been replaced with in just a moment. But this is a Clipsal Saturn Zen, and it looks cool. It looks slick, fairly slimline by the time it goes on the wall. It has multiple problems. The most obvious is these mechs, when you press these buttons, frankly, they feel like shit. There's like a lack of tactility. You know, it's like if you get into a really nice car and you close the door and there's a like confident thud as it locks into place. versus something that's just like really tinny and light and you close, oh, that sort of feels like shit. There's sort of something about that with light switches as well, where when you click a light switch, I want to have, I'll use this as an example and I'll come back to explaining what's hanging off the back of this. But you click these switches here, these are the old ones. And you know, like it's not pretty, but on, off, off. It feels good to use. These just feel terrible. So that's the first bit. The other bit is that this is obviously the faceplate. Now we can pop that off. It's going to break. Is it going to break? Oh, it almost broke. It has broken a bit already. So this is what's behind it. This is the faceplate. I'm not sure if you can see it on the camera, but there are 4 little clips on each corner, except this one only has 3 clips because one of them is broken off. And many of the others have even fewer clips and are literally held on by blue tack. I have many of these around the house held onto the wall, well, held onto here by blue tack because the clips keep breaking. They are just rubbish. That's the back end of it. So we have 4 different, what's the right word for these? Terminal blocks? Probably terminal blocks. Sitting on the back. Now, if I want to automate these, I will end up usually with 4 Shellys. And this is what's behind this other switch. So the chronology of this house is this is what was in here when I moved in. We've been replacing them with these, which are rubbish. The terminal blocks at the back, whether it's this old one here or this one here, have the Shellys wired into them. Now that's a Shelly 1 that just does power on off. That is a Shelly dimmer, which obviously dims. Now, there is I'm not sure if the word is a Shelly 2 or if it's basically like a 2-circuit Shelly, but there is a Shelly you can get, which I have on some circuits, where the one Shelly can do effectively two different circuits. But the dimmers, it's 1 dimmer per switch. So for something like this, imagine ending up with 4 of these green dimmers hanging off the wall. This is a real pain in the ass. And there are multiple times where even just getting the Shellys into the cavity in the wall to put the switch back on has been really painful for the electrician. It's Australia. So in Australia, anything to do with wires, you've got to have an electrician to do. You cannot legally install or change these yourself. You can change a light bulb yourself, and that's the extent of what you can do with electricity in Australia. So what do? Because it's a combination of trying to fix the thing that's annoying me so much in this house. Now, having said that, because I've got Shellys behind everything, I tend to talk to the lady on the phone every time I want to do anything. So it's rare that I click a switch. But that might also be because every time I clicked one of these, I wanted to kick it. So what do we do with that? And then, as I said before, we're doing a massive house expansion project where we're going to have a lot more rooms and a lot more switches. The real challenge is, how do I get the automation of the Shelly and the nice look of a switch? And we have an alternative, which I've got here, which I think almost gets us there, but doesn't. So this is a Zimmy Sonoa. Now, this is actually an Australian company, Australian designed. I'm not sure if they're made here. They're probably made in China. But Aussie company. And these look and feel beautiful. There's a big butt coming, but they look and feel beautiful. This is like a nice sort of glass style front. It's obviously plastic, but it's a glass style front. There's a 2-way switch. It is touch only. It's not a physical mech like this, but they've got a little bit of haptic feedback. So when you touch it, you feel it kind of move. And it is hard to explain without using it yourself, but when you touch these buttons, you're happy. Like, it's got a really, really nice resounding click to it. They are IoT, built in, native. And we'll talk about the problems with that in just a sec. But because they're IoT built in native, you can customize everything, such as, you can see there's 2, obviously, switches on this. What color do you want behind these switches? What color light? By default, it is a white light. Yesterday, I made it pink because I could. Do you want it to just be, let's say, pink the entire time when that switch is on? So you could look at it from the other side of the room and go, I can see which ones are on. Or do you want it to, when you tap it, go pink and then a few seconds later disappear so that the whole thing remains dark? It's a status LED here. Do you want the status LED to be permanently on, which it was by default? I turned it off. So then that sits on the wall and it looks just like that. And then as you get closer, it has a proximity sensor. So just before you tap it, it shows you in pink, if that's your choice, which circuits are on versus which circuits are off. You know all the complaints about these things breaking? Magnetic. So you can just pull it off the wall. And there are no clips. It's beautiful. It's so nice. Except, this is the big but. This is actually the box that came in. The big but is that the connectivity is via Bluetooth. It will work with your phone if you're in very limited range. There's an app, because there's an app for everything these days. It will work with your phone if you're in very limited range. Their strategy for remote range is that there is a hub, a proprietary hub, which will then Bluetooth to the device. Every one of these can be a Bluetooth repeater. So you can have a house full of these and your Bluetooth hub in a remote location. So for example, down in the server cabinet, and that will work. You can then control that Bluetooth hub. The Bluetooth hub has Wi-Fi connectivity. You can then control that remotely. I don't have the hub yet. I'm just basing this off what I've read online. There is another hub that can also implement Matter. So Matter being the Open IoT standard, which hopefully everything's moving towards, which is good. But now you've got all of these doing Bluetooth to each other via a mesh network and then to a Bluetooth hub. I've got to read more, but I have a feeling there's a limit of devices before you need another Bluetooth hub. Got to check this. Just Scott's comment. It was all going so well until Bluetooth. So Scott says, like a vibration motor, or does it have a mechanical aspect? Mate, I'm going to have to check that because the Sparky came over. You know what? I'm just going to drop the link to these in the comments, and then everyone can have a read of this while I'm yakking away. Okay, here we go. Zimi Sanoa in the chat. Yeah, the Sparky came over. I was in a meeting here and I came out and it was installed on the wall. So I haven't really looked at what's behind it yet. Okay, so now you have this Bluetooth mesh network in the house to a proprietary hub that then uses another proprietary hub to do Matter. There is no native Home Assistant integration I can see. There is a GitHub repository maintained by one guy. I think, I haven't delved into the weeds of it, but it looks like a personal repository. There is no Wi-Fi connectivity, which is what the Shellys for all their other faults did really, really well. There is no Zigbee. I was really hoping, for some reason, I was thinking they were going to be Zigbee. And if they were Zigbee, you would then have a mesh network, which powered Zigbee devices can do, and you would join it to the Zigbee controller in Home Assistant. And over the Zigbee protocol, it would expose all its capabilities and you'd see them all listed there in Home Assistant. And then if Zimmy drops off the face of the earth tomorrow, everything still works. I'm not sure with that Bluetooth hub, if it is a cloud controllable Bluetooth hub or if it can all run locally. And even if it can all run locally, do I want to have to, it makes me wonder. So I wonder if the hub exposes APIs over the web, which can then be called directly from Home Assistant, which at least then it's local. But it feels dirty to have Home Assistant have to Wi-Fi in to a hub, which then is going to, over a Bluetooth mesh network internally within the house, control your devices. It sucks, because the reason I've got multiple switches here sitting on the desk, and there's another one that's been taken off too, is the Sparky came over and he installed 3 new sets of switches. This was one, and then there were 2 others that looked very like this other one, which we're going to kick in the face. And this is so far ahead of the other 2 in terms of the look and the feel and everything except for that Wi-Fi situation. I mean, even the fact that the back of this is pretty much similar to that, which replaces imagine we've got 4 Shellys hanging off this. It's such a nice look and feel. So anyway, I'm going to get in touch with the folks who run this company and see if they can allay my fears, see if I can convince them to do a Zigbee version. I know that's a big ask. If it was Zigbee, it would be so nice. All my problems would be solved. And the thing is, like, these aren't cheap. Where's the price for this? It's a really, really big commitment when you're putting a lot of these in the house. Where are we? Zimi, what is it? Senoa. Oh, here we go. It's in Aussie dollary dues. Lots of different prices here. Oh, here's the other thing. So you can get these buttons etched with icons. I assume that they do that off-site, but you can etch whatever icon you want in there, which is really, really cool, because one of the flaws we definitely have with this is which switch does what. Particularly if you rarely use them because you're doing everything via the IoT, which one is the lights above the sink versus the lights above the bath? Etch the icons and you're good to go. Now, I'm sure that's not cheap, and I'm also sure that once you do it, then you're locked into that, and if you want to change your buttons or things, then you've got to go and get these etched again. But at least you can just pop them off the wall, and I assume send them away, or they send you another one or something like that. So Trader Sonora Smart 6-gang multi-purpose switch. So a 6-gang, it's actually not quite as bad as I thought, 217 Aussie dollars. So that's going to be, what, about 140 USD, somewhere around there. But the problem is that I haven't counted them yet, but I'm sure that if we do all of our light switches, and if you do the PowerPoint, so also built-in energy monitoring, which is kind of cool. So in the mobile app, you can see the energy being used, but if that was exposed over Zigbee and it just automatically, it'd be so nice. If you do the switches on the wall and then you do the power sockets as well, the GPOs, let's have a look. Yeah, so this one is $349 for 6-gang. Let's say for the sake of simplicity, it's $250 per light switch. And then what is it for a socket? Looks like $189 for a two-way socket. How many of those have we got in the house? This bit, let alone the other bits we're building, we must end up with 30 of the ones that are, I'm going to need a calculator. Let's say 30 of the ones that are $250. Going to have to be something like that. So there's $7,500 straight away, Aussie dollars. And then we're going to end up with, I don't know how many sockets. There must be 50 of those. Times 50. There's another 9.5. Like it, I can't see us, if we were to do everything in both houses, well, both houses, this house and what we're extending, I think it's going to be 15,000 Aussie dollars. And that is a lot of money. Now, mind you, the work we're doing is a lot of money too. And I don't mind spending it on something that is such an integral part of the house. But I want to get 15 or 20 years out of these as well. And that's what worries me if we're talking about Bluetooth over a proprietary network. I'm not sure exactly what the state of, say, Wi-Fi or Zigbee is going to be in 15 or 20 years, but at least it's an existing protocol that is implemented directly by Home Assistant. Perfect world, do Zigbee, implement Matter directly from each one of these devices. Don't require a hub if you've already got it. Very much like the Philips Hue. So on my desk here, I have two of those little Philips Hue, like little lamps. You can, as a normie, go and get a Philips Hue hub and you join everything to the hub. It's Bluetooth in the background, but you don't see that as a normie. And then you can use the Philips Hue app and all that sort of thing. Or you can pair these directly to Home Assistant using no Philips Hue app whatsoever over Zigbee. And I feel very, very comfortable with that, and they work beautifully. We've got a lot of Philips Hue in the house and outdoors doing the garden lights. Let's look at the comments here. Marek says, reusing software on kids, it's a shame so many parents have no idea that both Microsoft and Google have excellent free parenting control apps built in, and Apple as well. It is there. We use it for the kids. They're great. We cannot see their photos with that. We cannot see their messages with that, but we have all sorts of other controls. And frankly, I think not being able to see their photos and messages is a good thing, because if we can see it, it means it has to go up into the cloud somewhere and all the rest of it. Yeah. Jean-Claude Pascal Ginsler, greetings from Germany with respect for her life's work of making the world a little better. Thank you for that. Cool. Thanks, man. Later on, Marek says, oh dear, how many switches will you have? Imagine all those showing up on your phone. Well, yeah, and if you look at the app, like I'll pop open the Zimmy app, which is, it's going to look a bit crap because I'm going to be out of Bluetooth range of where this is installed. And incidentally, it's not far, and it's only through one wall. I reckon we're maybe 8 meters through one wall. But basically, that's the app. And for those of you that can just see it on the screen, it's current but has not dated well. Let's put it that way. I just don't like that idea. One of the nice things about the Shellys is that every one of these Shellys is a web server. So every single one of them exposes an HTTP interface. Every single one of them exposes APIs. You can log on to the Shelly. And if you want to go through and configure your settings, you can do all that. I've got, I think, 80-something Shellys in the house at the moment. I have just scripted a little app to go through and do things like just report on the names of them all and the statuses of them all. I've scripted a little app to go through and update the firmware on all of them. This is nice. This is what we need in order to have a house with loads and loads of IoT devices on them. Wayne bought an Akera light switch, H2. It has Zigbee and Thread, ZHA and HA. Doesn't support all the features of the switch. Makes me sad. No way to find out if or when it will be updated. Everything's a compromise, isn't it? Scott says, at what point do you pay a butler to turn the lights on and off for you? Even the butler would lose their shit pressing these buttons, I'll tell you what. Don't know if you have these in Oz. I've been using them as a drop-in replacement for the Hue, and they're a lot cheaper. Now, am I guessing that that's a bulb that we're going to be looking at here, mate? Let's see. It's loading. Speaking about not having things in Oz, so as part of all the works we're doing, we're updating, they call it a powder room. It's a toilet that the guests use. It's a toilet with a sink and a mirror. And we're at the cabinetry maker yesterday, and Charlotte's found this cool tap. And the tap actually comes out of the ceiling, so it's got a lot of drama to it. And effectively, the tap is a pipe. You screw into the ceiling, and then water comes down. And the cabinetry maker girl who's doing all the drawing, she's like, it has to be Australian approved. And like, because she said it has to have a watermark. I was like, well, what do you mean a watermark? Like the photo has a watermark? She's like, no. It has to be approved for sale in Australia. And I'm saying, mate, it's a pipe. Like water goes through it. Like it's one thing to say electrical devices with a current and the potential to burn down your house have to be approved in Australia, but it's a pipe. Smart lights for all. Yeah, okay. So are they just bulbs, mate? I think they're just bulbs. So we do have a bunch of much more well-priced bulbs, including some Zigbee-based bulbs, which I've been using. As part of this house redo, and in fact, as part of the renovations we've already done, I'm sure you would have seen some of these when you were at our place last 2.5 years ago. We've got a bunch of in-ceiling downlights, sort of recessed lights, and they're all LEDs, and they are all a single unit. And the way they work in Australia, and I believe there's different in other parts of the world, is you have a unit which clips into the ceiling like that, and it has a cable off the end of it with a standard socket on it, a standard plug. And when this place was renovated originally 20 years ago, that didn't exist. Everything was these, what were they? Xenon? I can't remember. Crap lights. Where they were wired into a terminal block. Now it's just literally a plug and play kind of job. But all of the lights we've been getting, like the cool looking lights that look nice in this place, yeah, it's not like something that you can just change a bulb on. Spencer's there. And we're going to Summit. No, I'm not going to Summit. I'm going to Europe. So I will be in London and Iceland when Summit is on. So sorry, mate, I won't see you. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Look, if anyone has any ideas about these light switch situations, I would love to know. And I'm going to push Sonara on this because this, I mean, it's cool. It's Aussie made as well, or Aussie designed or owned. If we could do a good job of this, that would be awesome. This would be the answer to all of our problems in IoT. Well, many of them anyway. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks. See you next week.